Again, thank you so much for joining not only this session. Of course, I'm glad you're a part of this session, but particularly thank you for joining this year's Skills in the States Forum. Obviously, a virtual edition of Skills in the States is a new step for us, but I've mentioned to some of my colleagues on today's panel, the lead discussants, as well as most of my coworkers know that this is at least among, if not my favorite event the National Skills Coalition does. For a lot of reasons, but one in particular is that this event really emphasizes the expertise of our field and allows really the expertise to come from the field. And so when we think about National Skills Coalition as a staff, we mostly think of ourselves as the 50, 60,000 folks around the country who really do this work on the ground. And this event is really about lifting up and emphasizing that expertise and what really happens in communities around the country. And so I'm thrilled to be a part of this Skills in the States Forum, virtual such as it is, and look forward to a chance to do it in person again. But as a refresher earlier on, this session is going to focus on sort of a few things wrapped around sector partnerships. And so we've heard a lot about sector partnerships and sector strategies and sector-based training in the opening, in the plenary and in the opening panel. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to define that so that we all know what we're talking about. But we're also going to talk a little bit about specifically about how sector partnerships can really play a role in delivering both foundational and occupational digital skills, as well as improving work-based learning outcomes. And fortunately, you're not stuck listening to me the entire time, but you get to hear actual experts in the field on the ground who have delivered some of this really remarkable work. And so we're excited to engage in this discussion. It is my hope, it is always my hope to make this conversation as engaging as possible, as connective as possible. And so we're going to begin today with some remarks from some of our lead discussants, and lead discussants, for those of you who've been with NSC for a long time, is a term you've heard us use, but it's certainly a wonky one. We call them lead discussants because really, this is a group. This is a Zoom call full of experts and folks with great perspective. And so I'll introduce Leighton and Rebecca in just a moment. But our lead discussants are really designed to help us get the conversation started and lift up two really strong examples. And then as we get into the opening dialogue, it's a chance for all of the expertise on the call to be laid bare. I also want to introduce my colleague Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, who no doubt many, if not all of you know very well. Amanda Bergson-Shilcock is sort of the brain of NSC in so many ways. She's got her arms around basically everything NSC does. But Amanda is also just specifically a remarkable expert on digital skills, and will bring a lot of that perspective into this conversation. And so while I will be sort of moderating the conversation, Amanda will have an ear out for the things that I missed or opportunities to expand the conversation in exciting directions. And so she and I will sort of tag team the facilitation of this conversation. As I said, I want to begin by sort of setting the stage for sector partnerships, and then I'll take a moment to introduce our lead discussants and let them tell a little bit about their unique examples. I often say about workforce investment boards, I often say about chambers of commerce, and I often say about sector partnerships that once you've seen one of them, you've seen one of them, right? They're all a little bit different. They're all pretty unique. They all manifest themselves in different ways, but they have a similar structure and model that they're built around. So when we talk about sector strategies, what we really mean is that it's building workforce programs and workforce training around local employers in a local community or region with a common skill need. So whether they're from the exact same sector or they're from similar sectors that share a skills need, the objective of sector strategies and sector partnerships is that you're really designing training and designing the delivery of skills around the needs of a local industry or a local skill need. We heard a little bit earlier. I'm going to lift up two comments that were made in the opening remarks today. We're anticipating historic investments. We're advocating for and anticipating historic investments in sector-based training. And so when we think about that and what that means, that really, when we think about that sector-based training being that local industry-specific approach to delivering training, that means that implementation and delivery depends on state investment, depends on state policy, because it's at that local level. It's where the boots hit the ground, where the rubber meets the road. And I also wanted to lift up another comment that was made by one of our opening panelists, which was that it's so important to begin with the demand for good jobs. Begin with what are businesses actually hiring for in order to wrap their arms around that training. And so that's beginning with that demand for skilled workers and what employers are looking for and what employers need in order to hire is part of what sector strategies and sector partnerships are really built around delivering, right, and beginning from. And so, as I mentioned, there are a lot of models of sector strategies and sector-based training and sector partnerships, right? And all of those are a little bit wonky terms. I tend to think of sector strategies as sort of the foundational place to begin, as a sector-based focus that you can wrap all of the workforce system partners around, right? All of you with workforce system expertise know that there are a lot of complicated funding streams and ways of delivering training, and sector partnerships really allow you to streamline that or combine them to make the most use of them, of all those resources in order to train for those local jobs. I tend to think of sector partnerships as sort of the next order of development of that sector strategy, right? Where those partners are working a little bit more closely and a little bit more specifically on key areas to work. And so an example of that, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, is that a lot of times employers are not only willing, but eager to engage in some of those additional needs that workers have, supportive services, transportation, childcare, or others, when they're working in partnership with their peers and they see that the delivery of sector-based training is working for their industry and they're able to engage and connect a little bit more deeply. I tend to think of sector partnerships as sort of a sector strategy maturing into that level, where there's another rung of engagement, where employers are really bought in driving and leading that process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but you don't want to hear just from me, and I don't want to talk to you this whole time. I want the experts to be engaging you. And so I'm going to introduce, we were going to have three, and unfortunately a conflict came up from my colleague, Amy, but I'm going to introduce our two upcoming panelists to tell you a little bit about each of their examples. And so I'm going to start with Leighton, and I think I may be going out of order from our plan, so forgive me to our lead discussants for operating a little on the fly. I'm going to start with Leighton. Leighton, if you'll take a few minutes. Leighton is, remind me of your title, Leighton. You are the Director of Education and Workforce Initiatives at the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership. And Leighton is going to talk to us a little bit about the work he's doing in Indiana to engage in sector-based training. So Leighton, I'll toss it to you.
Thanks so much, Rob and Amanda. Just really great working with you both over the last few months, and had a chance to talk to Amanda almost a year ago when she was doing some research into digital skills and different programs across the country. So excited to now come back full circle as our programs are more so fully launching in the South Bend Elkhart region. But yeah, just to dig in here, then I think I have 5 minutes. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, Rob, but I'll just plug in here.
5 minutes, give or take, is good.
Awesome. So Leighton Johnson with the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership. The South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership is a regional economic development organization housed in the South Bend Elkhart region of North Central Indiana. So we're a 5-county REDO with 3 Indiana side counties of Elkhart, Marshall, and St. Joseph County that we focus a lot of our work on. That's me on the right, working with one of our pilot apprenticeship employer partners. This is Matt Troyer, the CFO of Jomar Manufacturing and Fabrication in Elkhart County, based in a more rural region of Middlebury, Indiana, that focuses on fabrication of really high-end tools for different companies across the state and other areas as well. So really my role and what I'm representing here today is the project lead on behalf of my organization, the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership, to discuss a program called the LIFT Network, which is the Labs for Industry Futures and Transformation. It was a gift made in 2019 to the University of Notre Dame and established the collaboration between my organization, the Regional Partnership, and the University of Notre Dame. So our role with that is managing about $7.5 million for sector-based sort of strategies within applied learning and digital workforce skills. I'll dive a bit into those in a minute, but ultimately we have a three county geographic scope with this work. And my background before coming into this work overall was some independent consulting. Had a chance to work as a program manager at Jobs for the Future, and then some program associate and internship experience with a few foundations as well. So our overall portfolio, our sector strategy is focused on the advanced manufacturing and advanced industry sectors. So advanced manufacturing, IT, any sort of data analytics, data science, serving companies, DoD contracted companies, suppliers, et cetera. We have three sort of key signature program areas. One is an advanced industry internship program. We had our first successful summer launch with 33 interns placed, and our proximal target is 280 interns at the sort of STEM advanced side, to have about 50% of those, a bit over, retained within regional industry firms by the end of completing the programs. And then we have a DOL registered apprenticeship program, where over the next 5 years, we're looking to place 400 registered apprentices within regional firms by 2025. And then the outcomes there, we're looking for about 260 of those 400 placed apprentices to be full journey workers and employed 12 months post completion of their programs. And then we also have a really unique Digital Skills Accelerator Fund, which awarded grants, about $2.5 million this year, for non-degree and degree programs focused on advancing digital skills within the region. Across 8 higher education institutions, it was proposed for 5,000 credentials to be awarded. And it runs the gamut from educator development for computer science training to lean industry advancement certification training for incumbent workers, cloud computing boot camps for underemployed or incumbent working individuals. Happy to share an article that highlights, dives into some of those. So essentially, we have this broad bucket of funding of $7.5 million, and we divvied out strategies within internship, STEM placement, apprenticeship, reskilling, retraining, and digital skills, even across our higher ed ecosystem. And as it relates to this discussion of digital skills specifically, our apprenticeship program is sort of our crown jewel for reskilling individuals to obtain those core digital skills, but then even industry specific digital skills. So, looking at our regional employment outlook overall, like everyone else, we took a dip in 2020, but we typically sit around 280,000 overall occupations within our region, and that's across all sort of employment and industry sectors. But when we get into the crux of our region's specific sector strategy, we're looking directly at the manufacturing sector specifically as a way to put up our sort of legacy manufacturing companies, legacy industry sectors. Typically in our region, manufacturing occupations make up 30% of our regional occupations, and that's 10% above 20% in the state of Indiana, and largely above this kind of average or standard across the country as well. So a lot of manufacturing jobs are hyper concentrated, very high location quotients in our region. And then here's just a quick stat on the manufacturing dip in occupations and the overall projection over the next 10 years using some MC data. But ultimately, we're headed towards a decline in overall occupations. But the nuance there is what occupations are declining versus what occupations are actually increasing. And so as we think about digital skills, et cetera, it's those occupations in the manufacturing sector that require digital skills or embrace digital manufacturing, Industry 4.0, that are actually showing an increase over the next 10 years. So when we look at roles like mill setters, tool and die makers, largely don't utilize digital skills. They're more manual, routine, but then occupations such as, industrial machinery mechanics, electromechanical mechatronics mechanics, robotics technicians, CNC operators, some of these roles are showing 28% increases, 15% increases. So we've essentially taken a strategy to look at what are those occupations that are increasing and require digital skills. And that's what we calculated, about 6,586 out of the 8,600,000 current occupations. And we're specifically designating strategies that fit those areas. So CNC machining, industrial maintenance, robotics technology, PLC, et cetera, and then some future occupations. We've registered a program in software development, struggled a bit to launch that one, but looking into operations and human resources additionally as well. But the above occupations we have listed are all nearly registered with the DOL through our intermediary sponsor, the Northern Indiana Workforce Board, and just charting ahead. And on the right, we just had a fun photo shoot. This is Braden. He's a 2019 high school grad and currently a robotics technician apprentice at Jomar Manufacturing, and making right now about 23 an hour, and will likely be making about 28 or so an hour by the time he finishes the program. So, even recent grads who are working in, oh, there we go. Sorry, the slide, I didn't know I had this on here. But, even more recent grad able to obtain higher wages and be, add that benefit to their company. And just, overall, what's next in our work, we're looking to establish further proof of concepts with our apprenticeship program, working on some funding for an impact evaluation of the program. And then we're also working to scale further our advanced industry programs and internships, STEM, digital skills, and then looking kind of broader, what are, sustainability, thinking about tax incentives for companies, furthering collaborations with our state labor workforce boards, and working with overall shifting our apprenticeship program to the workforce board by 2025. And then also beginning to look at some type of formal sort of sector training consortium. So more along the lines of sector partnerships as we're discussing here, but largely our, compared especially to Rebecca, our role or our work is a bit more nascent in its maturity overall, and we're moving towards becoming more of a formal sector partnership, formal sector strategy. But the technique or tactic we're using is we're building the programs first, identifying the value proposition to companies, evaluating the programs, and once we have, we already have 22 companies in our internship program. We have about 20 companies ready to go for our apprenticeship program. And our view is once we build up, that solid bank of like 50 to 60 employers, that's our base that we then formally establish the sector consortium from to then advance the work. So we've already demonstrated the value proposition. We already know the occupations in demand. The programs are running, the programs are working. And we've even had employers come to us more recently saying, hey, like, how can we do more of this? Or what's next? Or, this program is great, but what else can we be doing? So almost they're coming to us asking to establish more formal partnerships and programs. So, just kind of taking the other approach, bottom-up approach of moving that forward. So really excited to be here and excited to hear on further.
Thanks so much, Leighton. I can't help but lift up a few things there. One is that, as I mentioned, digital skills is sort of an underlying theme of the sector partnership conversation. So I think it was really helpful that you laid the context that jobs in manufacturing that require fewer digital skills are looking like they're going to be declining in the years to come. But the jobs that require more digital skills and more digital engagement are the ones that we're really creating more of. And they tend to be higher wage jobs and more family supporting jobs. And so a great thing to lift up that sometimes there's messiness in the data that can be sorted out in those sorts of ways, but employers are really good at sort of identifying those kinds of trends. The other thing I want to lift up that you mentioned there that I can't help but notice is that you're beginning with delivering a strong value proposition to employers, demonstrating that the model can work to get their buy-in to build something even more robust and more connected to their needs. And so, as I mentioned, there are a lot of different approaches to sector partnerships, but I think the ability to build that buy-in and engage them more deeply is an underlying theme of successful sector strategies. And I'm glad you lifted that up. You'll notice, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add a point. I don't see any of my folks from my region on here, but yeah, we even received a donation from one company already just to say, hey, we want to invest in this further, and this is great work, and sizable one, and others are starting to ask like, hey, what do you guys need to expand or continue this work? So we haven't even asked for money, and folks are reaching out to try to support the work. So we know it's going to have some big demand, but just really want to get everything together first before we take that dive.
A clear signal when they're looking proactively to invest in its growth that it's having a real impact for those employers. That's awesome news. As I turn to Rebecca, I want to make a note both to Leighton and everyone else that Leighton, you got a couple specific questions in the chat that we'll make sure to spend some time on during the Q&A portion. And so give a look to those. And for others who may have questions along the way, feel free to jump them in the chat. Amanda is the most remarkable chat navigator on our staff. And so she'll be helping us kind of navigate that as well. And we'll make sure to get to some of those questions. Next, I want to turn to another expert. So we heard from the Midwest, and now we're going to cross the continent and go toward the Pacific Northwest and engage Rebecca Hansen. Rebecca is the executive director of SEIU's UHW Employer Fund. And so UHW West, I should say, Joint Employer Education Fund. So Rebecca, tell us a little bit about what that means and what sector-based strategies look like for you on the west side of the country.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully folks can hear me well and see me well. I actually switched to my phone because I just felt like the computer kept glitching. So hopefully this is good and clear and the audio is good. Okay, good. So actually just one correction. I'm not really the Pacific Northwest. I'm really statewide in California. I do cover additional other locations, specifically the Portland, Oregon area, sort of bridging both Washington and Oregon. And Oregon statewide, as well as, hi, Kristen, as well. Yep. Okay. So it's more of a California statewide program where the majority of our folks are, but we also operate in Vegas and in Colorado, in Denver. So just so you have a sort of sense of it. And we just added a new employer, we work with Planned Parenthood in multiple markets, but we just added them in the Rocky Mountain region, which added a new state, New Mexico, to our partnership. So we're really excited about that. That said, we cover 100,000, a little more than 100,000 incumbent healthcare workers across 19 hospitals and health systems. And the huge majority, over 80%, are statewide in California, a large number with Dignity Health. Also, Common Spirit, folks may have heard that Dignity Health merged in with a larger national company, Common Spirit, and Kaiser Permanente, right, which is a huge concentration of our incumbent workforce that we're serving. And our partnership really lets us reach 100,000 workers directly with continuing education, career advancement, digital skills, and other new skill development, and really preparing for the future of how the industry is changing and growing. And so this year to date, in 2022 or 2021, what year are we in? We served over 22,000 learners year to date. 70% of those workers are women, 70% are Black, Indigenous workers of color, around 25% are immigrants. In our graduates, who move into new jobs, we have about a 90% completion rate, graduation rate for our program participants. And those who move into new jobs are on average able to earn 45% higher wages. And we're able to partner with our employers sorry, did folks hear me? Am I still here? Okay, good. Sorry, I got a phone call in the middle of it was really annoying. So we basically are able to have a 45% wage increase, and we also are able to partner with our employers to document a 50% reduction in turnover for folks who participate in our programs. Just to give you a sense of the scope of what we're doing, we have 65 staff working across 7 offices statewide, really working to promote and advance underrepresented, non-clinical entry-level workers in EVS, which is housekeeping in the hospitals, as well as food service nutrition, certified nursing assistants, medical assistants into higher wage roles like radiological tech, respiratory therapy, nursing pathways, sterile processing, surgical techs. Key program innovations that really are important for serving this incumbent workforce are being able to provide credit for prior learning, prior experience, as well as building competency-based registered apprenticeship. To Leighton's point, a lot of our work in registered apprenticeship is nascent in the sense that this is new in the healthcare industry. We're definitely helping to innovate around it, but it's small and new and growing. So while we have 22,000 learners in various programs, a very much small number of 72 apprentices currently, in 8 different occupations. So we're partnered with our employers in the union deeply in building those programs. And one thing I just would highlight is that it really is about bridging the gap between education and the job for a population of workers who really come into healthcare any way they can. A lot of them come in entry level. A lot of them come in with significant education debt already from, how healthcare workers have typically trained. And they can't really afford to go without pay or volunteer during the clinical training period. And so, registered apprenticeship, even where we use both DOL and state DAS, we call in California DAS registration for our apprentices. But for many of our programs that are not registered apprentice, they take that earn and learn approach. We're really providing that wraparound services to support a combination of classroom and OJT that's really necessary for the occupations we train for. And then I will just say that in addition to innovating our programs around apprenticeship, I also serve on the Interagency Committee on Apprenticeship, which is a statewide effort to really expand apprenticeship in non-traditional industries, and specifically in California. A stated goal by the governor to reach an apprenticeship program of 500,000 apprentices, which is about a 5-fold increase from the current number in our state, which is around 100,000. So I'll also highlight, because this was brought up, I saw in the opening session today, that we are also partnered with the state in something called the High Road Training Partnership work, which is industry-based worker-focused training partnerships that build skills for California's high road employers. And these are really employers that compete based on quality and service achieved through the innovation and investment they're making in their workforce and human capital, and that generate family supporting jobs where workers have agency and voice. And this, I think, also was highlighted a lot in the morning session. But worker and voice and involvement really is integral to all the work we do at the Education Fund. Worker voice starts at our board, where we have trustees that are a mix of frontline workers in healthcare, as well as human resource and workforce leadership of our employers, our partnering employers, and as well as folks who represent the union organizations that are partnered with us. So we continue to do worker voice in program development from early planning stages, where we build labor management committees with worker voice, and throughout the program and delivery and evaluation of the outcomes of our program. Union members and workers in the healthcare industry play a key role in both sort of like engaging. We have something called our member to member program. So we have workers who are engaged in promoting and recruiting folks into the program, which is how we reach 22,000 people enrolled in program. We have focus group surveys. Members serve on we call our union members serve on our joint apprenticeship committees. And we also train the workforce to mentor in what we call precepting in healthcare, precept folks who are in their OJT. And that's like a really key component of both how we retain and get workers to completion. And so one more thing I'll just highlight about HRTP is that we are focused on underserved regions through that, as well as underserved populations, right? So our work with HRTP currently focuses on the Inland Empire and Central Valley, where there are really pretty extreme emerging shortages of healthcare workers. And also we're really focused through that work to tie it to some of the digital work, how rural areas access to healthcare has improved actually through the accelerated adoption of telehealth that we've seen in COVID. And I think we're going to talk a little more about digital training specific to our industries, but our sector strategies. But I'll say that we just really continue through HRTP to focus on equity, specifically addressing occupational segregation, building registered apprenticeship, and really just, partnering with the state to think about where where we need to train folks into jobs that are currently going unfilled in healthcare, and really addressing kind of more the longer term needs that we anticipate in our industry as we emerge from this pandemic. So I'll stop there.
Obviously, there's a lot to dig in on there, and we may not have time to get into all of it, but thank you so much. I'm also going to lift up a couple things from what you mentioned. One is that, I often think of workforce training about engaging new workers and bringing new workers into job sites. And so I really appreciated the focus on incumbent workers. I should have mentioned earlier on the call, I'm Rob, I manage Business Leaders United, our business organizing group. And like Leighton, I'm a recovering economic developer. I have an economic development background. And so when we think about retention and employers' ability to not only hire workers, but retain and develop them, that's so critical. And so I really appreciated the example of how sector-based training, sector strategies can play a role in retaining and developing incumbent workers. The other thing that jumped out to me is one of the things that a lot of workforce programs struggle with is outreach and engaging potential job seekers into those programs. And I love the example you gave of how workers in the programs do outreach and they play a role in inviting folks to join. I think that comes a great deal with what you bring as a labor management partnership of really emphasizing the worker voice and delivering value for them such that they bring their loved ones and their neighbors and their friends into the work as well. So another thing to lift up, that engaging worker voice and approaching this from a labor management partnership standpoint has some real value as well. So those are two things that jumped out to me about your overview. And of course, we're going to get into some more questions and dig in. But I want to toss it to my colleague, Amanda Berthen-Chilcock. Amanda, anything to add or jump out or note from some of these introductions before we get into some specific questions?
I just wanted to acknowledge two things. One is Leighton and Rebecca are leading amazing work. And I know a lot of the other folks who are in the room with us today are also leading really excellent work. And that goes back to what you said at the beginning of this, Rob, right? The reason Skills in the States Forum is our favorite event at National Skills Coalition is because it lets us get out of the way and let you all share with each other about the cool stuff you're doing. And frankly, let you borrow from each other and help you think creatively about how you can spend new federal money that's coming down, what you can learn from how other people are dealing with common skepticism or common barriers that may pop up. So I'm going to continue to stay out of the way here and turn it back over to Rob to get into some more specific questions.
Sure. So thanks so much, Amanda. And as you mentioned, I'm going to ask one quick question of Leighton and Rebecca, and Amanda's going to follow up with another. And then we're going to turn to you all to get a chance to either let you ask questions of us, let you ask questions of Leighton and Rebecca, let you connect with one another or share your own examples. That's really what we want to use the time for. So before we jump into that, just one quick question for both Leighton and Rebecca. Obviously, as I mentioned, I come from an economic development standpoint and a meeting industry needs standpoint, which is why I love sector partnerships. To the extent that you haven't already, maybe add a little bit about how sector partnerships specifically help employers meet their workforce needs and engage training in a way that makes it a little bit more industry responsive. Again, whether that's engaging them and getting them at the table better, whether that's better weaving and aligning workforce funding streams and services to meet their needs, or some other way. And one additional question on top of that is, how can policy levers, including but not limited to investment, how can policy levers really build on that momentum and drive the kinds of outcomes that employers depend on? So I'll start with you, Leighton, and then Rebecca, if you'd like to join in there too.
Yeah, I think from a sector partnership perspective, I mean, we're both traffic control and design partners for employers. So, you know, I meet with VPs of HR consultants, you know, directors of engineering at companies, and they've all had 6, 7, 8 different organizations come to them with different programs, you know, saying this is what, you know, you need to do X, or this could help you here. So a lot of times, you know, I'll just have an HR lead call me into their office and just say, you know, here's my demand, here's my need, what's out there to help me figure this out. And, you know, from my end, I'll walk them through various programs. So one note I had is, you know, don't pigeonhole a sector partnership with one specific occupational training plan. Create a model where the programs can grow as the overall program matures and more employers come to the table. We've had employers come to us about robotics technicians. They've come to us about gear, CNC machinists, production technicians, maintenance mechanics, master maintenance mechanics. So we've developed a model that our overall programs can grow as ultimately the program grows. But really we're that sort of trusted partner that helps an employer navigate the ecosystem. Which college, which post-secondary training program, is it your polytechnic? Is it your community college? Is it your industry training provider? So we help employers navigate, understand what the best fits may be, help understand costs, help them navigate state funding. In Indiana, we have a next level jobs funding program, and employers are eligible for dollars there, up to $50K for training for at least 10 employees at their company. So we help employers navigate funding, the design, and we also work alongside our workforce board to then co-design specific apprenticeship programs and various programs with the companies. And I can tell you that takes a lot of time. So right now we have about 4 programs registered off the shelf, and we bring them to a company and say, hey, here's a program, here are the core competencies of the apprenticeship, and then here are the proprietary or custom competencies. Gear manufacturer, we have a core CNC program, and now we're adding proprietary or custom competencies around specifically gear manufacturing, and working with the Association of Gear Manufacturers to design that program. But just the whole process of sorting through that, moving through that, it's a lot. And often once an HR person who's charged with designing it figures out how much time it will cost, some of them will just give up because hey, I don't have 50 hours over the next 2 months to dedicate to this when I'm struggling to hire frontline staff to just get production moving. And so, I speak from a manufacturing sector perspective, and Rebecca brings the healthcare perspective. So, in many cases, even worse with healthcare. So, just in general, just really, we help employers navigate. We connect them to our state offices. We connect them to our workforce boards, our chambers, our different partners, and then we sort of walk alongside and help co-design those programs as well. I could just answer this question on state earn and learn.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition to that, related, the state of Indiana has a state office of more advocacy office for apprenticeship, not an OA, that's designed some state earn and learn programs, specifically around similar to what Rebecca said, earn and learn programs for high school students. And it's been an interesting model where the state has worked to structure work-based learning, earn and learn programs for the high school student. And there's a lot of resources. I'm happy to share those about that program. I can say from the employers I've talked to, they've really, it's a mini version of apprenticeship. Schools are able to come to them with a template training plan and to say, here's how this program works. So one of our apprenticeship companies has a state earn and learn with our CTE program at one of our school districts. And I would advocate for further state K-12 programs similar to state earn and learns, because then that also helps us sequence the transition from CTE to registered apprenticeship. And we're right now working to connect the dots of our apprenticeship programs to some of the CTE offerings, and the state earn and learn program provides a great platform for that. And we're seeing employers really buy into that model overall. But the crux of it all is who helps design the program, and that's where the hang up always is. That's the common denominator for a lot of programs. You'll find that most of them will fund it because it helps with their talent development, but the technical assistance and the designing, that's the crux around a lot of these programs that we've seen.
Well, that's some great insight, and ready to jump in and answer one of those questions in the chat along with it. So thanks for that, Leighton. Rebecca?
Yeah, I could just repeat everything Leighton said. It's very similar to how we work with our industry and our employer partners, as well as our union in the workforces directly too. And I'll just you know, not to repeat it, but like, yeah, we're often requested and brought in. Like, we need some help. We need some expertise. Most hospitals and healthcare employers, especially now, but even before, you know, the current situation, this isn't what they do. They want to run a hospital and a business, and they want the talent there when they need it. And they don't want, they want to support workforce and job ladder opportunities for their workforce, but they don't, and they want to have local hire programs, and they want to connect through K through 12 programs, but they don't want to have to be the workforce development expert, and they don't want to have to, you know, they really want us to create clear, actionable opportunities for their employees to move up a job ladder. So that is really the role, similar role we're playing as a go-to resource. And then specifically, I would say that, you know, obviously similar to what Leighton said, it's really about both providing connection to the very specific credentialing and licensure needed for these different, like there's a certain sort of skills component that qualifies you in your particular job that is an industry recognized credential. And then there's also really tailoring the OJT to the specifics of that employer. And so we're able to develop training programs that sort of balance that. And a huge thing that employers love, and I don't know, Leighton, if you guys get involved in this at all, but is in, and I mentioned this earlier, is in training other workers to be the mentors and preceptors to support the OJT. The employers seem super excited and at a loss sometimes in terms of how to have how to develop the skills that they need. And it also provides sort of leadership development for staff, and potentially, you know, pathways into leadership and management for those workers who are playing that role in the training programs. And I'll just say, you know, again, I think this is similar to Leighton, like, you know, really having that regional multi-employer solution. Like tons of employers are like, well, what's Kaiser doing about this? Is there something you're doing with Kaiser that you can bring to our smaller location? You know, we're able to deliver a lot of economies of scale. I think our 22,000 learners this year have taken over 80,000 different courses and services and offerings through our programs. And that's really because we're able to leverage the scale of a $30 million training fund across 19 employers, some of whom are only spending like $100,000 to participate in the partnership. So it really, because it's based on the scale of how big they are, right? So they're really able to access a huge amount of programs and offerings. And so the economies of scale, I think, are a huge advantage of having that regional and multi-employer perspective. Yeah, and similar, we do all the project and program management. We braid together grant funding through the state, federal, and philanthropy resources, like to combine it with employer contributions into our training fund. And then let's see if I missed anything. Yeah, I think that was mostly what I wanted to say. I do think one thing I'll just highlight is we also are a huge proponent of redeployment situations where a job is changing or there's a whole you know, group that needs a new certification because of different changes in licensure requirements and things like that. And so we are sort of the go-to resource for a lot of employers, either if they're doing like a regional redeployment where they're like, we're changing how we do pharmacy. We need all our pharmacy techs redeployed into other jobs or other locations. And so we'll do the training related to that. And we're seeing more and more of that as technology changes jobs. We do also, you know, all the interface, like Leighton mentioned this, with the education provider so that the employer can come to us and say, like, we need, you know, we need more imaging techs, we need specialty training in MRI and CT, and we can go like find where are the schools, how do we deliver this in this location. A lot of times some of our more rural locations have a real lack of local training opportunities, but we're able to bring, you know, resources in from other areas, even in the past flying people in, or more and more so, like figuring out how to deliver that training online is really, you know, a huge advantage and something the employers and our, you know, union members look to us to do. There was one other thing the final thing I want to say about this, is that I think this might be a little bit unique to labor management partnership, but I'm curious if it's something, you know, Leighton, you observe as well, or other folks on the call, is that workforce is an area where there's a high level of alignment between employer and worker and union interests and desire to see sort of positive outcomes. And so it's an area where partnership can really develop. We can deal with some thorny issues through training. Like sometimes there's a dispute around what's happening in a particular bargaining unit or with a particular department. And training is a way to help, you know, help get more into a partnership around the solutions that everyone can, you know, support. We've done that both in situations where it's even just training on, like, you know, teamwork and cohesion in a particular department that's having issues. But it's even been around, you know, the restructuring of an entire statewide unit of medical coders where we want to, you know, simplify, streamline the job descriptions at the same time, then launch a registered apprenticeship so folks can move up into higher level coding jobs. So there's this, like, you know, a lot of opportunity. And I think employers engage in this work partly because they see it as sort of a win-win opportunity, and an opportunity to build partnership that then can extend into other areas as well, in terms of how they work collaboratively with their union partners. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Thanks so much to both of you. I'm hearing one underlying theme, which is that employers benefit from you being the shepherds and the guides and the go-to resources, right, that allow to develop scalable and replicable models that other employers benefit from, that you can adapt and really respond to ongoing and emerging needs accordingly. So there's some trust building and some resource building that comes with that. With an eye on time, so I do want to make sure we get to some open discussion very soon. With an eye on time, I'm going to toss it to Amanda to really build out some digital skills discussion too.
Thanks, Rob. So Leighton and Rebecca, we talked about this when we spoke last year, when you all were helping inform some of the research National Skills Coalition has been doing. But there's a distinction between the kind of baseline foundational digital skills that everyone needs to have so they feel confident downloading an app to their phone or doing basic tasks, and more industry-specific digital skills. And I know each of you have been engaged in that in different ways. I'd love maybe first for you, Leighton, to talk a little bit about what do industry-specific digital skills look like and how are you approaching that?
Yeah, industry-specific digital skills. So from I'll go standard kind of, so again, manufacturing based, that's our specialization. So, you know, in the past, manufacturing was very manual, routine. You know, second, third industrial revolutions, you go from steam, power, science being integrated into companies, increase a boom in productivity, production for companies. And you have, you know, steel mills everywhere across, where people are manually moving product across and being productive and getting throughput for the companies. And then, you know, third industrial revolution, really sort of computer technology started to be integrated within companies. So production practices got a bit more advanced with manufacturing. And then now in what many are calling the fourth industrial revolution, you're seeing Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things, hyper connectivity between computers, machines, artificial intelligence. So now plants are beginning to move on their own and requiring fewer routine skills. So this is the whole future of workspace where occupations that were very routine in nature are declining. So basic digital skills in a manufacturing setting are being able to read and understand the various computers, being able to, you know, understand at a basic level the code on different computers. But even as simple as, you know, some of our companies are moving their products into Amazon sort of aftermarket products, and they need someone on the front line who can input orders into Amazon and make sure that it's inventoried in the right way. And then beyond that, everything else is automated. But, you know, walking through a company, they say, no one here has the basic computer skills to be able to input things into Amazon. And, I have to have someone in my white collar role do that work, but I really want to be able to train somebody to be a more logistics type of technician on the floor. So the basic digital skills vary by industry. On the healthcare side, Rebecca will speak to those areas. But we're seeing just the ability to keep up with technology. Those are the basic skills, digital skills that employers in the manufacturing setting in our region are requiring. And then industry specific, even beyond that, is then programming and maintenance of equipment. So basic is operating, and then more advanced is maintenance, programming, and more sophisticated skills. So our apprenticeships cover those more advanced areas, and we've realized or identified a gap in the more basic skills areas and are trying to design some programs around those as well.
That's a great point. I just want to lift up something you said that we hear over and over again in our interviews with employers and training providers, which is some jobs, the jobs are transforming under your feet. So the way you used to do the job is now a different way. There's less routine work, there's more variable work, you need to have other skills. In other cases, the job may be going away entirely and you need to be re-skilled for a new position. So both of those are areas where we're hearing digital skills needs. Rebecca, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you all are approaching industry-specific digital skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say, I think running a training organization, we saw this pivot we all had to do, right? To move learners online. And we had an amazing amount of retention actually through that process. And I'll just say, I think for our industry, and it's probably true for a lot of incumbent worker training, maybe less so for younger folks like that, that a lot of workers, they just need support through that process. That's a specific thing that we do a lot of, and we did a lot of through 2020 into 2021, is just giving people that support. We saw, staff have shared with me, staff who work directly with our learners have shared with me that there were all these people that forever were like, yeah, I'm going to take that computer class. Yeah, I'm going to learn how to do these things. And it totally accelerated that. And everybody, a lot of folks, and that's partly why we saw such a big growth in training and desire in our industry for training, was that people were really recognizing, hey, I need to be more proactive myself in gaining these skills. But often when we've been brought in on those thorny situations I talked about, it is because the implementation of a new programming or a new systems or software that, a particular occupation needs to develop the skill to do, and also transition through that change management related to it. And that is a lot of the kind of work that we get engaged with our labor management partners. And then specifically, one of the major shifts we've seen because of the pandemic, and this is one of those acceleration moments that we've all been talking about, is that we saw one of our employers go from 8% telehealth to 80% telehealth, almost overnight. And so we were able to launch sort of modules for our workforce to really understand what are the fundamentals of patient care when you're not in person, because it is different, how you perceive what's happening with the patient, how you perceive how you speak to them, what kinds of questions you might need to ask, because you're not able to be in the room with them. And so that's been a really important, critical piece that we've been able to add and we're continuing to add, because I think there's not going to go back, right? The employers, and I think for a lot of patients, we would prefer to stay online for some of our medical work. And I think it's not known yet what's going to need to go back in person and what's going to be online. But for now, a lot of it still is online. I mean, I think almost not quite a decade, we've been part of helping the workforce transition to electronic medical records, right? That's been just an ongoing need. And we still hear more about it all the time, that folks are still struggling to kind of learn new systems, adjust to Epic, adjust to the next, EMR innovation that's happening. And I will just say that our organization has a big focus on addressing digital skills in the sense that we want our learners to develop those skills so that they have the option to do their training online. Almost everything we're doing currently has an online component, even if it has like an in-person clinical. As much as possible, we're moving things online. And so as an example of that, we have 500 members currently in an online medical assisting program. They do their externship in person, right, at the conclusion, but they're able to, I was talking to one of our learners and she loves it because she is a mom. You know, she was a clinical receptionist at a community clinic in Santa Rosa. She has 2 small children. She knew she wanted to move into more direct patient care, but she also thought that I'll have to do that after my kids go to college or something. Her kids are like 2, right? And so because we offered the program in the format we did, she was able to do that now during the pandemic, while working through the pandemic, completed her MA program, was able to online connect with learners from the union from across the whole state who were like in her breakout sessions. She loved the program. She completed her externship. Her same employer hired her at her employer, and her same employer hired her into that job. And now she's trying to figure out her next step to become a nurse, right? And so I think this is exactly the kind of ways that picking up the skills to be an online learner, then we're going to translate into this online, digital fluency you need on the job as well. I'll just stop there, but there's a lot, and I'm sure folks on the call have other examples too.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Hey, Amanda, so there's a question from Linda Ashworth. A question I'd be happy to
roll with it, Leighton.
Go for it. Go for it.
So Linda asked, Linda, do you want to ask yourself the question? Yeah, like your voice.
Sure, I can ask it from a voice. Hi, everyone. I guess my question is, a lot of what we've been talking about, which is important, is not only the needs of the employers, but the needs of the workers, whether they be incumbent or new into the system to get skills. So you've got those 2 groups who are very engaged in this. And my question surrounds how do you take these skills that both they need to gather and employers need to have and fit them into a registered program that somebody's going to recognize from the public sector? How do we bring the public sector and maybe some of our more traditional education providers in to say, okay, you need to adjust how you view these things to meet the demands of both our workers and our employers?
Yeah, so I love this question. So this is my bread and butter and actually what I get paid to do in my role. But essentially, so we have a multi-step process. One, we source companies through a collaborative economic development regional network. So we have local economic development organizations in each of our counties, Elkhart Economic Development Corporation, Marshall County Economic Development Corporation, South Bend Regional Chamber, and St. Joseph County, and other various partners. So we take this collaborative network where we've sourced employers through this network, through those local channels, local networks. So we talk with our chambers to hear and LEDOs to hear what they're hearing on the ground. And we talk to our workforce board to hear what they're hearing from designing specific training programs. And so we have develop a solid prospect list of partners. And then we engage in outreach with those employers to understand what is their sort of future demand for occupational training. And they share their job descriptions with us. They share their needs, their skill needs. And we also leverage labor market information to help inform our strategies. So I'm a big proponent of MC Burning Glass, but there's a lot of great platforms out there from MC to Chimera and others. But we do a quick labor market diagnostic to understand the sort of QCW seasonal posting of jobs and demand. And we also, in some levels, track the skills-based hiring as well. And now MCBG, they've merged. So there's a lot of adaptability across that platform. So we take this data approach, we take a stakeholder boots on the ground approach, we merge those, and then we meet with employers as we design the programs. And we sort of walk alongside those employers to then fit the competencies into the training plan for the apprenticeship program or the Appendix A for a DOL program. And then after the training is designed, we then bring in the higher education or training providers to then map what's called RTI, related training instruction, to the OJT, on the job training competencies, et cetera. And so we marry those, and then once those are combined, we then submit the occupation to the Department of Labor through the Northern Indiana Workforce Board as the intermediary sponsor. And then once the apprenticeship is approved, or if it's an already pre-approved program, there's a much more expedited process. We then talk through with the HR leads of, where do you want to source your employee, your apprentice from, whether internal or external. If they go internal, they identify the employees. We have them go through their pre-testing at the higher ed partner. And then upon completing the pre-testing, we then get them registered as students with the higher ed institution, and then they become full apprentice. But then we also match them to a subject matter expert, or what's considered a journey worker within the firm, to serve as their one-to-one mentor for the program. And then on the external side, we're still nascent in that side, but we're working to develop some marketing collateral, recruitment collateral, to be able to recruit students from CTE programs, vocational programs, and even off the street who's interested in joining the apprenticeship program. So we take a sort of multi-tiered approach, but then also, really work hand in hand with that employer to understand what are the specific competencies required. And then, alongside all of that, the requirement of a DOL apprenticeship is there is a wage scale increment increase, typically for our occupations, $3, $4 an hour or so. So it's a win-win for the worker and a win-win for the company.
Thanks so much. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it just shows how important that intermediary role is to making this actually work.
That's right. I'm glad you lifted that up, Linda. Thanks so much. And for those who don't know, Linda is for the Dayton Area Chamber and one of our Blue affiliate leads in Ohio, along with Shauna, who you heard from earlier. So thanks, Linda. For these last, we don't have as much time as I hoped, but for these last 12 minutes or so, I want this to feel a little bit more open and engaging. Obviously, with 30-something folks on the call, it's a little hard to navigate. So I want to point your attention to the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you want to raise hand, Amanda and I will be sort of tracking the folks who raise hands for, again, whether that's questions for Rebecca and Leighton, or me and Amanda, or one another, or to share examples of what you've seen in your communities. I really would like to open this discussion up now for others who want to engage as well. For folks who have asked questions in the chat, if you want to raise your hand and ask them in a verbal way, I think that'll help engage some of the discussion as well. I do think some of those may have been answered, but you may still have lingering questions. Rebecca, I think I see you physically raising your hand.
Yeah, I'm on my phone, so I'm like, oh, it's easier. I saw one question in the chat, just to quickly answer it. How to stay ahead of the curve in healthcare and how jobs are changing. One thing I'll share, we did an extensive sort of analysis back in 2018 of sort of where we thought our industry was going, where the shortages were going to be most acute, like what the needs were, what the training needs were. And one of the things that we were able to document in that analysis was the fact that as you climb the job ladder, the percent of your job that will be impacted by technology change decreases. There's a lot of discussion about how Watson is going to replace physicians for diagnostics, but just looking at our workforce, which is allied health, they just think, we know, yes, people need all these digital skills, but actually the skills that are sort of irreplaceable are the empathy, the caring, the interact, all the human parts of what we do that aren't necessarily innate to us. Like, we can develop and learn those skills. And so just to say that, definitely how we see sort of helping people stay ahead of technology change and impacting their job is by helping them climb a job ladder, helping them gain stackable credentials. We also see in new clinic settings with new technology, the need for multi-skill positions where people have an ability to operate a whole range of different imaging and others, health technology, so to speak, to serve a more diverse set of patient needs. So those are some of the things. The final thing I'll mention is like skills to be able to work in people's homes. Like, I think I was talking to Rob about this, like in California, there's been experimentation, even like doing surgery in people's homes, like going to their home, setting up the surgery suite in their home, delivering, like the person never even has to leave home and they get a hip replacement or a knee replacement, et cetera. So there's like just a lot of sort of things we can do to help people skill up to deliver care in different settings, as well as to be able to serve multiple functions in a clinic setting.
Thanks, Rebecca. I see Laura Ware's hand raised. So Laura, we'll go to you first and then we'll go to Kala.
Thank you. I put a kind of long blurb in the chat, but the quick version is, have either of you found not only in sector partnerships, employers willing to adapt their work environments, not only for you as trainers to get a really keen sense of what they want and qualifications from the worker, but for them to take a look in the mirror at how they can modify or adapt their work environments. One of the things that's come up over and over is, since COVID, is to have flexibility more than workers have had in the past, so that they can be able to manage personal and work life responsibly.
I can speak to that. The thing that jumps to my mind, even before the pandemic, was medical. We've done a lot of work with medical coders. It's like a funky area with different challenges. But one of the things specifically that we've had an ongoing discussion with one of our employers, where we have registered apprenticeship for medical coding, is around remote work. And that is something that, I think employers have been willing to offer remote work and consider that. But it's definitely the workforce pushing for it more so than the employers. But what it does is it helps resolve some talent shortage issues, because then it frees up, it sort of eliminates the location need. And I think for any occupation in healthcare where you can leverage a skill set over a wider geographic area, especially in a state like California that can be really spread out, that's just like a huge advantage. So we've seen that. And then I'll just say, I think, at the early stages of the pandemic, the union and employer partnered a lot in transitioning people to work from home who could. I mean, there were certainly a lot of healthcare workers who had to still be in the facility, but a fair amount of routine care moved home, and like call center and other kind of there was a whole bunch of jobs that did move home. And so the employer and union were really worked closely to establish sort of the ground rules, right? Because the employer was worried, like, we don't want you delivering care in your living room while your kids are running through. And we don't, you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole bunch of different issues there that were sort of troubleshooted, if you will, and agreed to through like a labor management partnership process.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Thanks, Laura, for raising it. I think Kala is next. Am I pronouncing that correctly? And jump ahead.
You are
with
doing
question.
really, really good. You say Hawaiian very well. Hello, everybody. I made it a little bit late and only had one cup of coffee, so I may have missed some things, but I'm so excited to be here. It's one of those things where I was telling Amanda, I'm already taking tons of notes, but my handwriting is terrible, so I'm counting on the recording. But one of the things that I came in on, tons of them, but we were talking. Somebody was talking about like pushing people online, basically. So the online the training is going to be primarily online, and we're looking at that same thing. And some of the things we're talking about with employers are LinkedIn Learning and Coursera, and providing a license and access to that. But I'm curious if you're seeing people working with their own LMS, or are there other platforms besides LinkedIn Learning, Coursera that others are using to find the training that's most helpful? I know that's a super broad question, but I'm curious about how, or the platform that you found, if there's any platform that you found to be, obviously way better than others, or if it's a case by case.
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, we are using an LMS, and we have even delivered like our own training through it. Usually we use that when we've developed content, either ourselves or with the employer, that we're delivering through our own LMS. And I'm kicking myself, but Kala, I can get the name of it. For some reason, I'm flaking out. It's the same one. I know it's the same one that the California Community College systems use. And the reason we selected it is because so many of our students utilize the community college system. Oh, Canvas. It's Canvas is that we're using. It's not necessarily, they all have their different pluses and minuses, and it's something that we've discussed a lot with our other, training fund partners around the country, because it sort of depends on, do you need to track hours? Are there specific sort of things that you need from the LMS? Then you might select a specific LMS that is able to give you that output data. Like, do you need to know if they complete? Do you need to know how many hours they spend on it? Do you need, like the different LMSs have different functionality. But most of we do a lot of online training through specific, licensing, professional organizations like ASRT that does all the radiology tech training online, and a lot, because we're serving an adult learning population, like a lot of the continuing education has been online already before the pandemic. And so we're like leveraging a whole bunch of different partners. We haven't worked with Coursera, but we currently are working with a group, and they just changed their name, but they were Voxy to do English language learning plus sort of pre-allied health training. And that's been really great. Oh, there you go, Engine. I knew they had a new name. We do use Skillsoft, and Skills partly because they were already embedded in a bunch of our employers. And they have a new sort of thing they launched that, again, I'm like forgetting the name of it, but it's Skillsoft, and they have a new launch of a new product that we've seen a huge uptake. So I think that people are really enjoying that. And then there's something called HealthStream that folks might be familiar with, that's healthcare specific. And then our employers have LMSs. And so we have, our larger employers have LMSs. So we have embedded links into our programs through their LMSs. And that sort of integration has been really awesome, and helped folks find their way to what they want. We also, for the online, we do very targeted, like we develop sort of like bundles or packages of classes on particular topics. We also target it to particular occupations, because we serve a really wide variety of occupations. And then just finally, I'll just say, like, we have partnered with specific schools in California, Coastline Community College. We do a lot of online programs with them. And we also work with, I forget the name of the college, but like we work with a specific college around lab work that they've been able to put online. So there's like, a lot of higher ed partners, I guess I would say, that we're using for online training.
Thanks so much. And I haven't,
that's super good. Love it.
Thanks for the great question, Kala. And I have an eye on time. And so unfortunately, I hope to have a little more time for discussion, but such is the nature of a big conversation with a lot of topics and also a lot of expertise to share. So what I would say is continue engaging with NSC. And we're always happy to put you in touch with more of the experts in the field, as well as the brilliant brains on our staff like Amanda, who seem to have their hands on everything happening everywhere. And so thanks so much for joining us, folks. I'm going to make a couple of commitments to you. One is that all of the resources that were linked in the chat or that were mentioned, as well as a few others from National Skills Coalition, we'll make sure to send out to all of you, as well as the recording of this session will be posted on the platform, so you'll have access to that and be able to engage a little bit more deeply. Certainly, NSC staff is happy to dig into these conversations even further, answer any more additional questions, or put you in touch with some of the folks who share their expertise on this call. I see a bunch of folks around this call who do tremendous sector partnership and digital skills work in their communities that would be great to connect folks with. So thank you all for this rich discussion. I really appreciate Leighton and Rebecca, and certainly Amanda, for bringing such excellent expertise and such rich perspective to the conversation. And we're so glad you've all joined us for Skills in the States Forum. So we can't wait to see you tomorrow. I think it kicks off at noon. Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to give people the wrong impression. Yes, we kick off at noon tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing you all again, and really appreciate the time today. Thanks, everyone.